Welcome in everyone to Picks and Parlays Bettors Edge. We've got some NFL playoffs, Super Wildcard Weekend wrapped up. We've got some crazy teams to talk about because Baker and the Bucks have got it going. They trounced Philly last week. We'll get to that game. CJ Stroud played a phenomenal game last week, led the Texans now into Baltimore. I feel like that's where we sort of need to start. Let's just talk there. We don't have to talk anything about the other AFC North team that lost. Pony, I know how we feel about the Steelers in Buffalo. We'll get to the Bills, but let's talk about an AFC North team that possibly has a chance to win everything this year. But they're going to be taking on a red hot CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans. Some things to look for in this game, though. Winds could be expected to be over 30 miles per hour. That could spell trouble for a Texans team that is very successful when throwing the ball. However, to establish a run against Baltimore might be a bit more difficult. So right now, the Texans are an 8.5-point underdog heading into Baltimore. Tony, do you think this is sort of where the storybook season for the rookie CJ Stroud comes to an end? Or do you think he can at least keep it close and surprise some people against a Ravens team who's had a lot of rest?
Well, that's a really good point about wins, Hannah. And I hadn't looked ahead to the forecast yet to see if that was going to be a factor or not. But if it's 30 miles per hour winds, that will ground the air attack of Houston. So if it does get to that point, I want people to take what I'm about to say and maybe recalibrate or adjust. But if we get more manageable winds, talking about in the 10 miles per hour, 15, even 20 mile per hour range, I like Houston in this game. CJ Stroud, since he's come back, they've won every game. He's done great without Tank Dell. Montgomery, even in the running game, has given them a balanced offense. Their defense with Ryans as the coach, obviously, with Gennard and Anderson, we saw the way they harassed Joe Flacco in this game last week. And also, Baltimore is going to have to guard against all the time off. This was a major problem for them when they were the 1 seed in 2019 and they lost outright at home as a double-digit favorite to Tennessee. And they got off to such a poor start and they never recovered. And you just heard John Harbaugh for the last week or so being very mindful of that, being very concerned, it seemed, of that. So I think Stroud is on such a heater right now, Hannah. Even though Baltimore has buried teams at home, if you're telling me I'm going to get more than a touchdown with him, I'm going to take that action right now and roll the dice that he's going to at least keep Houston competitive in this early divisional round game.
Yeah, this is one of the ones for me where I've been having trouble sort of making an argument for both sides. But the reason I went with Baltimore, one of the reasons was those wins. We know what the weather is right now on the East Coast. And if you take that into account, Baltimore can run the ball and do it effectively, especially with Lamar Jackson. The other thing I had to look at was the Texans defense seemed to take a step forward as well, especially when it came to their pass rush. Well, the last time these two teams played, Lamar Jackson was sacked 4 times and the Ravens still came out on top because in the inverse of that, Stroud was also sacked 4 times as well. So he struggled against the Ravens. So let's say similar things happen. The Ravens are still finding ways to win. I know that 8.5 number feels like a lot, but I felt comfortable taking Baltimore in some of these some of these bigger numbers this season and for similar reasons. Right now, the Ravens have a top 5 passing game in the league. Texans are mid to bottom when it comes to defending against that. So if they have to worry about a pass at any point and Lamar Jackson, I just think it's going to be too much, especially when it comes down to the fact that the Ravens have had a lot of rest. They've had time to dissect what CJ Stroud is doing well, being able to have watched that game. So Lamar Jackson's legs, over 800 rushing yards this season, plus the way they can throw the ball. I just think this could spell some trouble for the Texans and have that come to an end. Craig, go ahead and break the tie here.
Well, I can't break the tie on the side. In fact, I'll talk about how I would play the side in a second, but I think this is an under game. I think it's going to be windy. I think it's going to be cold. I don't think Houston's going to be able to just go back and sling the ball like they did against a Browns defense that I thought could slow them down. I thought the Browns would struggle to score, but I thought they could slow them down. I think this is a very good matchup. We saw early in the year, I think it was early September, and these two faced off. So we didn't see that Houston offense that we saw late in the year. But they put a lot of pressure on Stroud. That's the key. I don't think you're going to be able to throw the ball down the field with the wind. I'm taking the under here. Now, on the side, this is a great opportunity for an in-game play. We know how teams that have the bye, they've had very slow starts the last 2, 3, 4 seasons. This is Houston gets up early, then you can play your Baltimore Ravens because then if they score a touchdown or a field goal early, now you get it off the key, below 7. Because to me, laying over 7 in the playoffs is very tough. So to me, if I was in gaming, I would play the Ravens, hoping that Houston scores first off that slow start from Baltimore, and then Baltimore figures it out and wins late.
Keep in mind, too, though, when these two teams played last, Stroud was passing the ball 40 plus times in that game. So their only solution against that Baltimore defense was to try to pass the ball. Now, maybe not being able to do that, I think Stroud could also be under pressure a little bit early. And I think that will help if the Baltimore offense is maybe having a slow start. Their defense is where they're going to rely on. So the under there is actually a pretty smart play. I actually like the argument for that a lot too, Craig. Let's move into the Green Bay Packers. There was nobody happier than my father watching the Cowboys get beat in the fashion that they did. And good for Green Bay.
Did he know his daughter picked the Cowboys? What happened there? Did that come up in the conversation with your old man at all, Hannah, or did you leave that little detail out?
It slightly did, but his happiness watching it. And as truthfully, I didn't mind watching it either. I'm not necessarily a Cowboys fan. I just was so surprised in the way that game went, let's say, because they feel like there's got to be a lot of coaching because they have the pieces when you look at Dallas to be good. But we're not talking about them today. We're talking about the Packers because they are the team who got it done. Now they're almost a double-digit underdog heading into San Francisco. I think this was to be expected from a young Packers team. You're going in against a Niners team who's been unstoppable all season long. They're well rested, specifically someone like Christian McCaffrey coming in well rested as well. Do you feel good, Craig, about where the Packers are to at least keep this close? You just talked about not wanting to lay 7 points in the playoffs. Well, how about 9.5?
Very tough. Very tough. A team that's, it's not like they just rested 1 week. Remember, they rested all the key starters in the last week of the season as well. So now you have that extra. Now, granted, some of those need it. McCaffrey had the bum calf, I believe. But I just think it's asking a lot to cover this big number. I think the safer play is playing the over, to be very honest. If I was, early in the week, we're filming this, I'm looking at the overplay in this game. This Packers offense has been on a little bit of a roll. Now, the defense, they've given up their fair share of points. And remember, even Dallas late in that game was carving them up. Now, granted, it was a little bit more vanilla defense at that point. But I think you take the over in this game. But if I'm playing the side, as much as I do believe in the offensive genius and all the firepower that San Francisco has, I just think it's too many points against a Packers team that's young. They don't know. They don't understand they shouldn't be winning these games. They just going out and doing it.
But is your best bet taking the total on that one? Is that what you said?
I would take the over. I think it's safer. We've seen these matchups can kind of get out of hand, and all of a sudden double digits doesn't sound like that big a deal if San Francisco gets on a roll.
Yeah, one thing I think to look at in this game as at the same time, Pony, is if San Francisco gets up and Green Bay has to abandon the run and just worrying about throwing the ball, they could be knocked off balance pretty quickly. And that's where you could see an offense that's been really clicking struggle. So will they struggle in San Francisco as bad as what the number suggests?
Yeah, I've grown to have an appreciation for Purdy more than I did at the beginning of the year. Now, there were obviously peaks and valleys, especially the Baltimore game on Christmas night where he threw the 4 interceptions. But, in this matchup, I look at what Green Bay did last week against Dallas. In my opinion, it was more about Dallas beating themselves than what Green Bay did. Yeah, Green Bay came out and scored a touchdown on the opening drive, but Dallas, to me, choked again in the playoffs. And you saw CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott weren't on the same page with each other. They were having their issues. Defensively, things were a mess. I mean, credit to Green Bay for being able to take advantage of those things. But I've also seen Green Bay in the last month or so go on the road and need a field goal late to beat Carolina. They won the game by only 3 and gave up 30. And they lost to Tommy DeVito and the Giants on a Monday night on the road. So I don't think they're the same team as if they're playing the game at Lambeau here. We've seen San Francisco as a battle-tested playoff team, having gone to the NFC Championship game last year. My opinion, they have the best roster in the NFL, the most complete team. I trust their coach. Unless Purdy has another game like he did against Baltimore where he gives the ball away 3 or 4 times, when San Francisco gets matched up against good teams, they typically win and they win big. So I'm going to take them and lay the points. And I know it's not the popular thing to do to lay a big number, but if you actually look at it, the last, I think, 11 years, teams that are a 9.5-point favorite or better are covering like 70-something% of the time. We saw it with the Steelers and Bills last Monday. So I feel better about betting San Francisco right now because I do think Green Bay's situation was aided by the fact that Dallas just didn't show up to play in the wild
Yeah.
card.
I think that's safe to say as well. There are some numbers when you look at this, it's because the other team didn't perform well. That'll be case in point, essentially, I think, with Tampa Bay as well, which we'll get to in a second. But my best bet in this one and best bet of the playoffs right now is looking at a guy that San Francisco can rely on, and that's Christian McCaffrey. Right now, his rushing total is at 86.5 rushing yards. If I can get this number anywhere under 90,
Yeah.
I'm taking it. 6 of his last 7 games, he's gone well over this. The Packers are one of the worst teams against the run this season when it comes to giving up total yards. McCaffrey has had a lot of rest. That calf injury wasn't something that was a huge concern. I think if he had to have played, he probably could have worked through it, but now he's had time to rest. I see him rushing for 100 yards or more. Tony Pollard, who hasn't really been up to par this season, and Pony had a lot of expectations for him early.
Yep.
He had over 50 yards rushing against the Packers, and that was with Dallas playing really poorly and being down and having to throw the ball. So if they were able to have a more balanced offense, his numbers could have been larger as well. So my best bet of the week, best bet of this game, look at Christian McCaffrey over 86.5 rushing yards. I think he's going to lead his team to victory. I think he's going to have a bunch of breakthrough runs there. Moving on to Baker and the Bucks, a team that has been so fun to watch be successful this year. This seemed to be Baker's last ride with the team. Well, now they're sort of in a pickle because he's led them to the second round, essentially, of the playoffs. Heading into Detroit, though, where the Lions, led by Dan Campbell, look sort of unstoppable. I understand that was a 1-point game, but they just seem to have some sort of edge. Not to mention the game against the Rams had a lot of emotion surrounding it, and they still came out on top. But how confident can you be to lay 6 points with the Lions at home against the Buccaneers team, who Baker seems to have rolling here, Craig? You're laughing a lot over here in this one. Do you completely disagree? Do you think the Lions are done?
I had the Eagles, so it tells you what I know. I mean,
Tony and I had the Bucks, right?
I know.
You had the Bucks too, Tony?
Like I told you guys, or I told Hannah before, I had all the information. I knew there was infighting in the team, and I still couldn't bet the Bucks because the last 2 games of the regular season, I got beat when I played the Bucks against the Saints. They didn't look good. They didn't look good against Carolina the last game of the year. Carolina had chances, really should have probably kept that close, even maybe won the game. But this is one of those teams. You do not want to face Baker Mayfield. He is a winner, he's going to win you the game or lose you the game. He's not going to just be a game manager. That's just not in his nature. He's a gunslinger, always has been. I think this is a no-lose situation for the Bucks. And the Lions are coming off their first win in forever, all that emotion. I think this is a very tough spot. I'm going to take the underdog. I think they have the much better defense, and I don't think it's close. I think they'll be able to run the ball more. They didn't really run the ball very well. That was the one thing I thought they should have done more. But I think the Bucks on the road will run the ball better, and I think Baker's going to make a couple big throws again. I think this is an upset alert. At worst, I think we get the cover though.
Yeah, keep the ball out of Goff's hands, essentially, because the Lions can put up points. We've seen that at times this season, but we've also seen them in some really tight games. The last time these two teams matched up, the Lions won 20-6. Goff passed for 353 yards. St. Brown had 12 catches for 124 yards. Do you see a similar result this time in Detroit, Pony?
I really don't. You got to be careful about betting games based on results that happen, especially if we're talking about back in September and October. And I think that especially with Tampa, they're a much different team than they were at that point. Baker was kind of hanging by a thread. There was even some conversation there. They might go to Kyle Trask at quarterback. Their season looked like it was not going to end in any kind of playoff situation. Todd Bowles was viewed as almost a lame duck coach. And they, to their credit, they won a watered down division. We've seen that before. I mean, teams have gotten hot. Arizona in 2008 won the NFC West at 9-7 and went to the Super Bowl. So it has happened. Okay. I think that the Bucks have a lot in common for me with the Seattle team last year that made the playoffs with Geno Smith, because it's the same story. Baker threw 30 touchdown passes. He's got wide receivers aplenty there with Evans and Godwin, and now you throw Palmer and even more on top of that. Good players. White catches the ball out of the backfield. I just think it's a balanced offense. That Seattle team, by the way, did beat Detroit this year. And, Hannah, that game against the Rams, it's interesting. Almost all the conversation has been about Detroit did what an amazing thing to have that cathartic moment, 30 years in the making. Fans were crying in the stands. Dan Campbell's getting all kinds of love for game balls. I mean, the Rams really drove the ball the entire game, and if they had converted in the red zone, they win. I mean, that's the story of the game for me, is that they didn't punt the entire first half. Every position, it looked like they were going to score a touchdown, and then things fizzled out in the red zone. If Tampa Bay moves the ball like Detroit did, not only do I think they cover 6, I think they win the game outright. And I agree with Craig. I think the weakest unit in the game is actually Detroit's defense. They got away with all kinds of penalties against the Rams. I don't think they get the same ref luck in this game. I'm taking Tampa +6 and also on the money line.
Yeah, I liked Tampa at +6 too. If I had to make an argument for it, it won't be my best bet in this one, but I think it's really hard in any sport across the board, any age, to play a team that feels like they have nothing to lose. And that's what the Buccaneers are to me. They weren't expected to be here. So right now, anything other than what they've already done is just a cherry on top of everything. Baker Mayfield's proved himself. He's proven they can get here. So I think they're going to be a very hard team to play because they're going to be guns a-blazing, nothing to lose at this point. My best bet in this one, though, is when you look at the Lions, you look at what they're doing well. Jared Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown is almost a locked-in connection at a lot of points in a game. Right now, St. Brown's receiving yards are at 87.5. I think he goes over this. I know it seems big, but the last time these two teams played, he had 12 catches for 124 yards. He could have less than that amount of catches and targets, and I think still go over this. I think that's what the Lions are going to have to do to win. They're going to rely on their best player, and he is that for them. You saw that connection in last game as well. When you need a big moment, you need some extra yardage. That's who Goff is throwing the ball to. So I'm going to say he gets a lot of chunk yards in this one. I mean, Smith had 8 receptions for well over 100 yards against the Bucs last week. So they're struggling a little bit to cover a wide receiver one, essentially, in that situation. The Chiefs and the Bills. The Bills, they proved what they can do. Josh Allen looks like he is a dual threat quarterback that everyone's expected. We have all said, and as Steeler fans, I admit this, I was the one who went with the Steelers, had a lot of hope there. The TJ Watt curse got us yet again. But truthfully, Josh Allen just had his team ready to win, and he was willing to do what it took as well. Now, the Steelers' defense at times looked like they couldn't tackle, which was concerning, but I think the Buffalo Bills played the game they needed to, despite the changes as well, the weather elements out there. Josh Allen has his team ready to roll. We have said you don't want to play the Buffalo Bills at this point. So do Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, someone who knows what it takes to win this late in the season, do they have what it takes to go into Buffalo, Pony?
Well, they do, but this is going to be their first road game with Mahomes at quarterback in the playoffs. They've played 16 playoff games. It's crazy that this is the first time they're going to leave other than the Super Bowl. They played Tampa in Tampa for the Super Bowl, but that was obviously COVID year, and it was not like it was a real road environment. So this will be the first one, and it will be a real road test because there'll be 70,000 Bills fans there. And they'll be giving Mahomes the business the entire game. There are a couple of leaks with the Bills defense, but overall here, Hannah, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about when I look at these games, do I give a team more credit for winning or do I give a team more blame for losing? Miami looked like they wanted to be anywhere other than that game Saturday night. To me, the elements and the freezing temperatures, to his body language right from the beginning of the game screamed to me that they were ready to get their offseason started. Their game plan right from the beginning was just run the ball and get out of Dodge, it seemed like. Didn't trust Tua to make plays. We know that's not the case with Josh Allen. He did not have the turnover problems against the Steelers. He looked like elite Josh Allen. He looked like MVP caliber Josh Allen. I like the way he's playing right now more than Mahomes. I like the Bills' offense right now, and I think the Bills' defense, even with the injuries, McDermott has done such a good job calling the plays and coaching them that I think it's going to be more of an even fight against that Chiefs offense. And I don't think that all their struggles are behind them. Rice looked great against Miami. So did Pacheco, but Kelsey looks ancient to me. I don't expect him to have a big game, and I'm going to lay the points. It's a small number. I'm comfortable betting Buffalo at home to finally beat Kansas City in the playoffs and get to the AFC Championship game.
I'm doubling down on that 100%. I have the Bills at 2.5. I mean, yeah, part of it is rooting for the team who just beat your team, right? But at the same time, watching that game felt like prime Josh Allen to me. That's the quarterback we've all wanted to watch, especially early in the season where we had questions possibly about Buffalo and Josh Allen in particular. I really think he has his team ready to go. And that Buffalo defense stepped up as well. You saw it when there was a mistake, right? There was a rebound right after it. So they didn't flinch in adversity. I think they're just ready to roll. And I think being at home again is a huge advantage for them. I also agree with everything you said about the Chiefs and Dolphins. The Chiefs are going to be playing a team this week who wants to win it all and believes they can. Last week against Miami, it didn't look like that. Craig, are you on board with us here with Buffalo in Buffalo?
Well, I mean, if you said before the season, we would not be shocked if these two teams are going to be facing off to be one of the teams that probably going to go to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
But if you said, hey, the better tight end group is actually going to be in Buffalo, you would be like, no way.
Yeah.
But that's the case. Kincaid and Knox were great.
What, the first team in playoff to have two tight ends? Was that it?
Yeah.
Two tight ends scored?
It's been like they've been consistently getting better throughout the year. And we saw what Kincaid was in college. You knew he had that ability to not just be a possession receiver, that he could actually go down the field. I think it's going to be the key this week. I think whoever's tight end group is better. I expect wind. I expect cold. I think throwing the ball over the middle is the key. Buffalo has lost last year to the Bengals in Buffalo. I think they remember that game. They're playing a different style of football now. And when they changed coordinators early in the year, you know what they did? They went to the run game, and that has changed this team. Cook is a real threat to control the game. I like the Bills with Pony here. I think the Bills win. I don't actually think it'll be pretty close. I think they're going to win by a touchdown or more. I just think it's changing of the guard here.
Yeah, I was close to making this my best bet for that reason. I also get so confused, though, throughout the year where we look at Buffalo and say, why aren't you establishing the run? We know every year when they're good in the playoffs, it's because they're establishing the run, and they just seem to forget about it early on. And then as soon as they do, so maybe this is strategic by them. Maybe that's the way they confuse people about how their offense is run. Do you fellas have best bets, though? We know how I feel about
guys, think about this. I was just thinking about that when you were talking. Remember that this game ended in controversy? Like when it was like, if that touchdown stands, this game's in Kansas City.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
It would be
the lined up offsides. Kadarius Toney, you're exactly right about that.
Yeah, I mean that ended up being obviously a big play in that game, but in the season of the NFL. So yeah,
maybe this is the stars aligning for the Bills finally. Then they don't have to play the Bengals. This is the Chiefs. They're at home. Is this your best bet though, or do we have other ones?
I want to just follow up on one more thing Craig said. If they lose that game, they don't even make the playoffs because they're 10-7 and they don't have the tiebreaker. So Buffalo's completely out of it. So that's a really keen observation. So one of the specials that I like this week, every week in the playoffs, they offer up on the big betting house sites specials. You can bet most passing yards, most rushing yards, things like that. I know I said I like San Francisco to win the game against Green Bay, but because I think they're going to be trailing the whole game, I like Love to lead this week in passing yards at 6-1. It's kind of like what Dak had to do against the Packers in the playoff game last week, and there's so many empty calorie yards there because they're just nonstop throwing the ball in the second half. I think they're going to be a one-dimensional offense. I think that's where their stats come from. So Love at 6-1 to me is a very intriguing bet to have over 300 passing yards.
Do you know why that also, I really like that observation by you with that bet, because we're not expecting that from the Texans. That would have been the only other maybe concern I would have had. But if the winds are bad and that weather's bad, they're going to have to try to run the ball. We know that San Francisco can rely on the run, so don't expect Purdy to be in that position. The Lions, Goff here and there, I don't think he's going to get to that point where it'll be that much of a difference. I think those teams will be more balanced. So I think that could be a good one there. And I don't see Patrick Mahomes having a deadly passing game either in Buffalo if there is some bad weather there as well. Interesting one there, Pony. Like that observation. Pony's always given out some interesting futures here. Wasn't one of your futures about Buffalo in the Super Bowl? Not too
Fly
long
the
ago?
Bills last week to win it all.
Yeah. All right. Look at this. Maybe we're just gonna have Pony's futures bets. We should make a. I'm gonna have to start tallying these up to see how much you can predict the future. All right, Craig. What's your best bet of this week?
Actually, I like that. I also saw Baker's in that range as well because I think they could be down.
Mhm.
And let's remember, the two like East Coast games are going to be bad weather. So I would throw all those quarterbacks out. So it definitely is going to come down to either the dome game with the Lions and the Bucks, or that San Francisco game where I think the leader of the passings for this week is going to come from. So I do like both of those. Baker, they could be down, and I also definitely think the Packers are going to be down. So I like that one. A good pick. For me, it's the Bills are my best bet of the week. I think Kansas City has done an amazing job this year to stay relevant and to try to extend this dynasty. You cannot do it with this receiving group. They are not good. That's just facts. Imagine if Tyreek Hill was on this team. I mean, this team would be probably the team to beat still. They just don't have those weapons. We said it. I'm not saying Kelsey is injured or he's over the hill or what, but at this point of the season, I'm guessing something's banged up in him or he's just washed up. Either way, I like the Bills here. I think they win 7+ points. I think this is a Buffalo finally stakes the claim they're the team to beat in the AFC. I think if they win this game, I actually think they beat Baltimore next week too.
I feel really good about everything we've talked about on this week's episode. I hope everyone watching does too. We've given you a bit of a longer-winded analysis here on all of these games. And that's because we felt really passionate about digging into some of these. Craig and I even talking before. Very surprised at some of these teams who have made it this far. So they deserve all of our attention and respect in terms of where we're going to go with a lot of these numbers. But make sure if you want any of our other best bets or see what anyone else is going on at Picks and Parlays, you download that new Picks and Parlays app. I know Craig also on there, very active, and you can subscribe to him as well. He has a nice conversation group going throughout every game, letting you know when you might have to back out, when you might want to put all your money in. So definitely some good advantages to downloading that app and getting all of our inside access. This is Picks and Parlays, Bettors Edge. Good luck with more NFL playoffs. That's Craig Trapp. I'm Hannah Mears, and that's Andrew Fillipponi, and we will see you next week.